Hi, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to the Lafora Talk Show. This is Season 3, Episode 4. We are so excited today to have a very esteemed panel that will be joining us. I am your host. My name is Tanya Friedman, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Connetics USA. We help nurses come to the United States and have done that for many, many years. I'm so excited today to welcome our panel. We have Carla joining us. Hi, Carla.
Good evening, everyone.
Welcome. We also have Leanne joining us. Hi, Leanne.
Wonderful to be here.
Thank you and welcome. And last but not least is Paul, who needs no introduction to the Lafora Forum. Welcome, Paul.
Hello.
Hi there. So our topic today is self-care for nurses, how to manage and prevent burnout. This is a very important topic. Even before the pandemic, there was lots of reports of nurses getting burnt out, both physically, emotionally, spiritually. And now with all of the extra stresses of the pandemic, this has become much more of a hot topic. So very excited to dig deep into this topic today. And before we get started, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Lafora admin team, to Paul, Miss Jean, Louise, Anna, all of the members of the Lafora admin team who give us this opportunity once a month, every month, to do the Lafora Talk Show, where nurses will be able to help nurses. That's really the point here. Burnout is a very real thing, unfortunately, but hopefully today is going to be a show where we're going to have some very positive feedback, a lot of hope and inspiration for everybody who's watching. So if you are watching all over the world today, please put into the chat what your name is and where you are watching from. We love to see everybody all over the world. Put in your name and where you're watching, and we're going to get started. So I'd like each of the panelists maybe to give us just a brief background about yourselves and to tell us a little bit about yourselves. Let's start with Carla.
Hey, everyone. I'm Carla. I'm a registered nurse for almost 17 years now. I have a varied nursing experience background. I started with medical surgical and then shifted to pediatrics. And most of my nursing career is focused on that. I also did LTAC back in Middle East. And when I migrated here, I continued with pediatrics. And then when COVID hit, of course, I shifted gears into different practice. I started with as an infection preventionist, and that is what I'm currently doing still.
Yeah. Okay, so lots of different experience in lots of different areas, Carla, and I think that'll be an interesting perspective because right now you're not actually working in bedside nursing, correct?
Yes. It's been 2 years. Yeah. Same as COVID.
So that will be a really interesting perspective. I'd like to move now to Leanne. I'm not sure if everybody watching knows, but Leanne is pretty famous in the United States. Before she introduces herself, she's probably going to be humble. So I'm just going to tell everybody that Leanne has been featured in Newsweek magazine, Voices of the Century issue, on Fox TV News, PBS, BBC, NPR, countless radio and television programs. Her messages of hope inspire people over the world. In August 2018, Leanne was inducted into the Speaker Hall of Fame. She's a New York best-selling author of 15 Chicken Soup for the Soul books, and this includes Chicken Soup for the Soul, Inspiration for Nurses. So, Leanne, I thought I would maybe just give you a shout out because I know you're probably going to be humble, but if you want to maybe just give us a little bit of your background.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Yes, I have been a nurse for a long time. You can tell by my hair color. And
well, thank goodness for hair dye.
I see. I have been every kind of a nurse. I started out in med-surg and then pediatrics and hospital work. And then I was a school nurse, and then I worked in clinics, and then I worked PRN at a hospital where I floated to every department. So I've had vast experiences in all parts of nursing, which came in really handy when I was able to write the book Chicken Soup for the Nurse's Soul, because I knew a little bit about every kind of nursing, which was really a blessing. And it did hit the New York Times best-selling list when it came out in the year 2000. So then we wrote two more editions of Chicken Soup for the Soul, just for nurses. And that sort of catapulted me into a speaking career. And I do speak full time and have a program called Self-Care for Healthcare, which was a keynote. And now I've turned it into a year-long program. And I give nurses and all healthcare workers tools to care for their minds, bodies, and spirits every day, which was needed before the pandemic, and it is crucially important now. So that's the privilege of what I get to do every day.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Leanne. It really is an honor to have you on the Lafora Talk Show. And we can't wait to dig deep into the tools and the philosophies and all the things that you can share with both the nurses on the panel as well as all the viewers that are watching all over the world.
I'm delighted.
Paul, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey guys, to our subscribers in Lefora. I'm one of the admins of Lefora group, but I'm also a nurse practicing here in the United States as an ER nurse. Moved here in 2017. Prior to that, I was a nurse educator in the Philippines. I've been a nurse for a total of 15 years. Currently about to graduate for my doctorate degree this Saturday in doing
Congrats.
APRN and also certified FNP. And of course, passionate about nursing education, but also very passionate about family medicine and emergency medicine. During the COVID, I was working as a crisis nurse for state of Texas and state of Chicago. I was logging in 48 to 60 hours a week.
Wow.
And then, of course, I'm going to talk about later what I did to balance out the stress, because COVID was really hard for a lot of nurses that were actually working at the bedside. And that's it. I'm here to share my stories, and hopefully people can learn from it as well.
Thank you, Paul. And I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion because, all of you are nurses, all of you are looking at this issue of burnout and how to manage it, how to prevent it from different angles, and sharing your experiences, I think is just going to be so inspirational for everybody who's watching all over the world. So if you have any questions for our panel, please put them into the chat. I'd love to get through as many questions as we can from everybody who's watching all over the world. I say Babakar is watching from Gambia. Welcome. And if you are watching from anywhere in the world, please put into the chat your name and where you are watching from. Okay, so let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about what is nurse burnout. I know that this is a term that we hear in the news all the time. Nurses were exhausted before the pandemic, where there was a nursing shortage. Now the US government have actually come out and said that the American Hospital Association has said that it is no longer a shortage. It is now an emergency, nursing emergency, which means that there is enormous pressure on nurses right now. So let's look at what nursing burnout is. And I think we've got a definition here on the screen, which is it is a widespread phenomenon characterized by reduction in nurses' energy that manifests in emotional exhaustion, lack of motivation, feelings of frustration, and may lead to reductions in work efficiency. Paul, can you maybe tell everybody why you think it's so important that we talk about burnout and how to prevent it?
Yeah, so I think burnout is very rampant in the nursing community right now. I guess that's not only exclusive for nurses, but also all the healthcare providers, of different, professions and different backgrounds. I guess what makes it really extra hard is that our jobs require us to give more than what because we're dealing with human lives. So we got to be emotionally connected with our patients. We got to also be physically healthy, mentally healthy, as well as we provide the care. And we want to make sure that we're not committing mistakes as we do those patient care related stuff. So I guess what happens is, if you keep doing this constantly for too many hours or long hours at a time, or no recovery in between, or not taking care of yourself, I guess healthcare workers are more likely to experience burnout faster. I think I don't have the data, but I think it happens, quite often. What I see right now, like I said yesterday during the teaser, was I'm seeing a lot of new nurses. I've been a nurse for 15 years. I don't think I'm. I was probably feeling burnt out, but I think I still have more to give. I'm sad with the fact that new nurses are leaving the bedside faster or sooner than what nurses were 15, 20, 30 years ago. And that probably contributes, things that contribute to it is not only the workload, but also when I did my DNP classes, we've identified factors that's causing, nurses to have burnt out or to get tired or to have lower quality of care. It's one of the factors is the increasing complexity of healthcare. So like right now there's so many changes with the guidelines, with the way we do things, with with how we increase patient quality and patient satisfaction at the same time. So all these pressures to the nurses, the demand for better better care or better outcomes are probably taking it all, emotionally, physically, mentally, for nurses as well as the other healthcare providers. So I
Yeah.
think burnout is very real.
Yeah, no, I think that you're 100% correct. I'm sure Leanne and Carla would agree. It's unprecedented, the amount of pressure and stress that nurses are under right now. And in the US, there just simply aren't enough nurses. It's a supply and demand issue. So there's a lot of factors that make this topic very important and timely to speak about right now for nurses, so that nurses can really look at how to manage their burnout. Leanne, I know that there are a lot of symptoms that nurses might experience with burnout. And I think we have a slide that you sent us of some of those the symptoms that can be experienced both physically, mentally, and spiritually. Can you talk a little bit about this and some of the feelings or some of the symptoms one might experience?
Absolutely. And the reason I thank you for putting the slide up, because very often people think they are doing better than they really are. We are such benevolent, altruistic people that we give and give and give, often at our own expenses. And often we think, well, I'm doing okay, physically, mentally, and spiritually. But then when I ask people to look at this list and put a little mental check by any that apply to them, and so I'll just read them so anybody can contemplate in case they can't see the slide, or just to give it some thought. Any physical changes might have as symptoms of stress and burnout include appetite changes, headache, fatigue, poor sleeping, increased alcohol intake, frequent illnesses, digestive problems, a pounding heart, grinding teeth, rash, restlessness, foot tapping, finger drumming, nail biting, smoking, and mental symptoms of too much stress, forgetfulness, poor concentration, dulled senses, lethargy, boredom, low productivity, a negative attitude, anxiety, the blues, mood swings, anger, bad dreams, irritability, crying spells, nervous laughter, and a loss of a loving feeling in our lives. And I believe we are mind, body, spirit people, and there are spiritual symptoms of too much stress, feelings of emptiness, loss of meaning, doubt, martyrdom, loss of direction, cynicism, apathy, abandonment, worry, isolation, distrust, a feeling that nobody cares. And when I review this list of symptoms sometimes with my presentations, the audiences jokingly laugh and say, is there a box for all of the above? Because too often they relate to too many of these symptoms. And sometimes I think until we stop and actually do a self-assessment, that we don't really realize the toll it's taking on us.
That's an interesting thing to talk about, is a self-assessment. Can you talk a little bit about that and how somebody would do that?
I think just taking time to step back and take a look at your life. We are such a busy, busy society, and we are such a busy, busy, demanding profession. And so often we are so busy taking care of other people that we really neglect to take care of ourselves. The same qualities that call us into nursing are the same qualities that allow us to put everybody else first. So I actually ask people to take time out even if it's 30 minutes. I recommend people to spend 15 minutes a day just in that spiritual mode, to meditate or pray or whatever it is you do, but maybe in that reflective time to look at that list of symptoms, or sometimes take a day off, sit by a mountain stream or on a park bench, or just give yourself the space mentally, physically, and geographically to look at that list of symptoms and do that self assessment, and then determine what you need to do and what changes you can make in order to better care for your body, mind, and spirit.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. Is ready to take the space to be able to do a self assessment. Carla and Paul, if you look at that list, and let's put that slide on again, and maybe some of the viewers can relate as well. Carla, what are some of the symptoms that you've seen in yourself that are symptoms of burnout? It might have been on a physical, mental, or spiritual level.
For me, personally, what I have experienced when the pandemic started was definitely there was boredom. And I've always been the type to have a perky attitude, but for some reason at that point in time, I was like thinking about just negative stuff. And of course, what comes into play is I was also postpartum. So aside from what is happening around, I also had the blues, the postpartum blues to top it off. So it was really a lot on my plate at the time that I'm just thankful that I didn't end up seeking like professional help. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but I really had to sit back and like what Leanne said, you really have to reassess yourself and see where you are at or what's missing or what's happening to yourself before you can actually really function back to how you normally were, like do a self check.
Yeah, I think
Well, and
that's
I might suggest, if I might, that the next step to that, then I think that is so important that we often forget. So now I took a half a day and I did this assessment. Then I like people to actually take time to figure out what is it you need to better care for your body, mind, and spirit. And then I joke that we need to ask as persistently as a toddler asks, because when a toddler figures out what they want, they ask them for it until they get it, right? I want juice,
Yeah.
I want juice, I want juice, I
persistence.
want juice, till somebody gets the kid juice.
Yeah.
So I want us to ask for our juice, first of all, from ourselves. I think we need to give ourselves permission to care for, and maybe we need to ask, figure out, do you need more time? Do you need more better diet? Do you need more sleep? Do you need better mental health? Do you need more spiritual time? And then figure out what you need to do to change your life, and ask the people around you, maybe your family or your coworkers or your community, and yourself, to then take the next step after the assessment and actually make those requests of yourself and others to you implement a better care plan for yourself.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, a care plan for yourself. Thank you for sharing that, Leanne. So, Paul, if you look at those symptoms, what are some of the things that you recognize in yourself that you were experiencing that now you look at and can see the symptoms of burnout? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad that Leon is sharing this slides because I think if I want to sit down and check on this, I probably would be able to check 50 to 60 or probably 70% of these things. But some of the things that stood out for me, definitely there was fatigue. Like I said, um, at the start of the pandemic, there was a need for crisis nurses to fill up spots for for nurses that are getting sick. We have to um, um, take like 48 to 60 hours a week. Some nurses are working 72, 96 hours. We're talking about 12-hour shifts times 5 days, 6 days, 7 days with no breaks in between. So I was definitely having a lot of fatigue, a lot of irritability, mood swings. I was having a lot of apathy. I work in the ER, so sometimes it's emotionally draining. So we kind of like separate our emotions, keep it in check, and sometimes we're too guarded, like we don't want to show emotions because there's so many things going on, so many people dying at the same time. We say we cannot be too emotional because otherwise it's just going to stop us from doing what we need to do. But then because of that improper negative coping, and you keep doing that every day, at the peak of COVID, um I was used to like I'm sorry, work in the ER, but there would be like 3, 4 people that would die in a shift the most. But during COVID, I would see 6 people die, 7 people die. We would intubate back to back. We would run out of crash carts. It was crazy. So it went to a point that I was developing apathy, that I felt like, there should be some emotional connection with your patients, because you are treating them as humans. They're not just an object that you need to do this and that. But because of the apathy, you kind of like lose that connection with someone. You're just going through the routines, the tasks. You're just showing up to work just to work. So, with burnout, it kind of does that to you. You're like a robot responding to like the tasks that you need to do, but there's no real connection. And at the end of the day, there's no sense of fulfillment or sense of, like, I did something for someone today. Like I did a difference to someone today. I was able to help them understand or navigate their healthcare situation, which I normally would do if it wasn't for I was working that much. So partly it was also my fault because I was doing a lot of shifts. But definitely there's a lot of stuff in that checklist that would have told me, if I had known that list, or if we had given, okay, I'm having a burnout right now, and probably I need to slow down what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think so many nurses, thank you for sharing that, from for everybody on the panel, because I think there's so many nurses that are probably looking at this and listening to you right now and thinking the exact same thing and saying, oh my goodness, yes, I didn't even realize that I was burnt out, because I was so, it's kind of like that little hamster in the hamster wheel. Yeah, we've got here some stats. The majority of RNs experience burnout at some point in their careers. In fact, in 2017, Kronos study found that 63%, nearly 2/3 of nurses in hospitals reported experiencing burnout. So if people were experiencing that in 2017, how much more so having lived through and worked through a pandemic where the stress has just been, I mean, it's just another level. It's nothing that anyone could ever anticipate or ever expect. So I think, again, just a really important topic that we are covering today, and just to give a voice to those people who might not even realize that they were just kind of going through the motions and experiencing that burnout. Leanne, what would you say is the difference between burnout and compassion fatigue? Well, first of all, what is compassion fatigue, and how is that different to burnout?
I see compassion fatigue more as the emotional drain when we've just given so much that we're exhausted emotionally. That's my own definition. And I think burnout is mind, body, spirit. And sometimes we pay attention to one and not so much the other. And in compassion fatigue, they pay a lot of attention, thank God, to the mental and the emotional, and sometimes even the spiritual well-being of the caregiver. And then we don't always pay attention in some aspects to the physical part. And I've coined a phrase that I sort of made up, but I suggest that we are not so burned out as we are drained out. I live in Colorado, and we've had horrific wildfires here in the past few years. And when you see the damage from burnout, it's destroyed. And I like to give hope in that perhaps we're not so burned out as we are drained out. And we can refill our wells, I think, by giving tools and programs and support for each other, that we can build our resiliency again and prevent complete burnout, and not be so drained out, and refill our wells.
I think that's a great way of putting it. I've never heard that before, drained out.
I made it up.
Yeah, but I love it. I think it says a lot, because it's not that, when you say drained out, as you say, there's hope. There is, you can be filled up again. And it doesn't mean to say that if that's how you're feeling right now is how you're always going to feel.
Right.
So I think it kind of gives another perspective to it. Okay, so we've got Babakar is joining us. Pope is saying hi, Paul. Arlene is saying hi, good night, everyone from a nice and breezy Jamaica. Sounds like fun. Noreen is from Dubai. Henry's watching from Philippines. Excited to work in North Dakota soon, Henry. So Henry, we're excited you're going to be joining our client in North Dakota. And we're going to be talking about another topic. So keep watching, everybody, because we're going to be talking about burnout, but coupled with when you arrive in the United States and you're also experiencing culture shock. So that's coming up in the second half of the show. So if we talk about self-care, what actually is self-care? What does that mean to you, Carla?
Self-care for me personally is I need to take care of my own well-being. So it can come in different aspects, whether it's physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. So all of this will come into play. So with what happened to me, I think in some way it was a blessing in disguise that I was on maternity leave when COVID hit, and so I continued that. I told my facility that I'm just going to extend my leave, and I am not sure as to when I'll be able to join again. And they were very understanding about it. So always make sure to a point that you check in with yourself about, like what Leanne mentioned, about what you really need. So that's really tantamount with taking care of yourself more than anything.
Okay, so yeah, that is true. So we have a slide which is what are the factors that cause burnout? Carla, what would you say are the factors on the slide that maybe cause for you specifically? Because your situation is a little different. You weren't doing bedside, but still,
Yes.
experiencing burnout. What would you say was the biggest factor for you that was causing you burnout, and how you actually were able to care for yourself?
So for me, since I'm transitioned to as an infection preventionist for the state of North Dakota, we were actually working long hours during the weekend. So I believe that fits the criteria for me, working long hours, and then the emotional drain and patient deaths. There were tons of deaths every day, especially from the long-term care facilities, and we would see them dropping like flies. Like every day we get reports from all of the facilities in North Dakota, and we would see the number of deaths. It was just staggering. It was like, wow, I can't believe this is happening. There's so much deaths that happened during, especially the first surge before the vaccine rollout even started. There was just a ton. It was like mind blowing.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when you're in that situation, you kind of cope with it in the moment, but afterwards it hits you what you've actually lived through. And so how would you say that you were able to take care of yourself in this situation?
So in that situation, what I did was I made like a buddy system. This is something that I got from another friend of mine who was working in the hospital. I was like doing a self check with another friend of mine and asking her, hey, how are you doing? Like we were doing chats like every other day, at least even just for 5 minutes. So we were asking each other, hey, how did your day go? Did you feel what made you feel that there's some gratification from what you did from today's work? Okay, so make sure that you at least sleep for at least 6 to 8 hours instead of 8 hours, because they were just working and working during those time. So 6 hours, and then I made sure that I ate healthy food, vegetables, fruits, of course protein also had to be there. And since I am Muslim, what also helped me a lot was to connect really with my faith. My faith in Allah really helped me a lot to cope with so much of the menace that COVID made since it hit. So that's a huge deal for me.
Yeah, that is very helpful. There's that saying, um, if you have faith, then you believe that life happens for you, not to you, because there's a big
Mhm.
difference, and
Yes.
that kind of gives you that grounding. And Paul, if we put that slide up again, what causes burnout? What were the things that you were what that you have experienced and are experiencing
So
that cause burnout from
yeah,
your perspective?
thank you for the question. For the factors for me, definitely, I think I'd put at the top of the list is the high stress work environment, working in the ER and getting all these patients that have like, emergent issues. COVID made it extra harder because, people are presenting symptoms that are very severe at the same time and we don't have enough resources. Then, of course, there's emotional drain and patient deaths that are staggering, that are usually that were more than what we were used to. There's lack of sleep because shifts are like 12 hours. You don't get off on time, and then you have to come in early, so the 12 hours can easily become 14 hours. Working long hours, short staffing issue was still a problem, was even worse during the pandemic. So, and of course they were sicker patients, more complex, because now with COVID, you're not only dealing with pneumonia and respiratory conditions, but they can also have failing heart and failing kidneys and failing neurologic functions. So if you put all of these together, like I said yesterday, our job was already hard, but the COVID made it like twice, thrice harder. So that kind of like sped up the burnout. Plus, working long hours, of course, is one of the major factors of the burnout.
So how have you in the past during COVID and going forward now taking care of yourself?
Yeah, so you know what? I thought about it for a bit. At the beginning of COVID, when they were deploying a lot of nurses, I was working 48, 60 hours. My first COVID deployment was in a very high acuity hospital here in Houston, Texas, right in the med center. It was a very tough job. Um, I had to quit after the third month. Well, my contract was only 2 months. I extended for another month, and I had to quit after the third month to take a break. I actually took a 6 week break. And during that break, I took trips. Of course, it has to be safe because it was during the COVID. Did more, outdoorsy stuff like biking and swimming and running and, spending time with friends through FaceTime or video, family members, stuff that I couldn't do when I was busy working all the time. And it also helped that I worked with my travel buddy, which was also my friend Jovelyn, from the Philippines since 2007. So we reconnected. She was from Missouri. I told her to move over to Houston to take on this travel contract with me. And we worked together. That kind of helped. So when we work together, we kind of like when there's downtime, we could talk and like eat together and talk about stuff. But definitely, 6 months into the pandemic, I took another contract that lasted for 5 months. But I already know that when I'm off, I wanted to like have like time in an open space, like in a park, maintaining safe distance. But definitely, I like to work out like 3 to 5 times a week. So gym is part of it. It was just hard because you have to wear the mask, but I mean, got to do it. So that's why when they said they're rolling out the vaccine, I was the first one to get it because I just want to live, a
On your
normal
life.
life where I can work out without a mask. But it still took a while to do that.
Yeah.
I definitely like running and biking and, just going out in the sun because that makes me feel like alive. Because work can sometimes make you feel like you're just going through the motions. And
Yeah.
that kind of like, like worsens the burnout and feeling drained. But whenever I'm off, I like to separate myself from work. So anything that makes me remember work, I don't think about that much. I'll have to worry about that later. If they tell me, hey, you need to do this education online, you missed it. I'll take care of it after work. When I'm off, I want to be
Yeah.
separate from work. So
Okay.
I want my time.
So,
So go
so
ahead.
lots of good tips there. Carla was eating right, speaking to her friends, Paul being outside, exercising, and also speaking to your friends because we're social beings at the end of the day. So I think that's really an important piece of it. Carla, you mentioned your faith. Leanne, can you tell everybody how you got started in healthcare? Because I think this will be interesting for people to hear about how you got started. And maybe you can also just add to that, like, what are the different kinds of self-care? Because I think Paul and Carla have touched on some of those, but I think there are probably more that you can share with us.
So you're wanting to know how I got involved with self-care for health?
Yes. Yeah. A little bit of your history. I know you had we've got some pictures from Vietnam.
Oh, well, that goes a ways back, for sure. Okay, briefly, at the end of the Vietnam War in 1975, I agreed to go to Vietnam and escort 6 babies back to their pre-assigned adoptive homes. I was a volunteer for Friends of Children of Vietnam. And, oh, I didn't know you had all of those. Yes. And so when I got there, President Ford had okayed Operation Baby Lift because bombs were dropping. And they weren't when I said I'd go, but they were dropping when I got there. So instead of bringing out 6 babies, they said, you'll help us bring out 300. I was only there for 5 days, but I went into this 2-story building, and that one photo is of all the babies laying. There were 100 babies laying all over the 2 floors of this building. And on day 5, we took them to the airport, and that's me in a Volkswagen van with just 22 on the first leg of the journey to the airport, where we had a C-141 cargo jet. And they made bassinets out of cardboard boxes, and we placed 2 to 3 babies in a cardboard box. There were 9 of us to take care of 100 babies. I imagine, I say that's the worst shift ever, but it was joyful work, bring the babies to freedom and to families. And the best amazing part of the story, that's a part of it all, is my husband and I had applied for adoption of a son through this organization, and we expected to be assigned a child in probably 2 or 3 years. But when I was there, they said, because of Operation Baby Lift, you can go into the next room and choose one. And I went into that room of 100 babies, and a little 9-month-old boy took one look at me, crawled into my arms, my heart, my family. I didn't have to choose him. He chose
my gosh, Leanne, that is
unbelievable.
So
it is
touching.
Unbelievable.
Wow. What a
so
story.
I came home and was quite happy being a nurse and a wife and a mom and working at the clinic and at the hospital. And then finally I wrote the book about Operation Baby Lift. And that's when healthcare organizations started calling me. I was on a national nursing board, and they asked me to speak on lessons I learned from Operation Baby Lift. And that's when I wrote a book and a speech and built a career around balancing life in your war zones. Because what I learned from that is, in order to cope in the war zones of our lives today, we have to be strong physically, mentally, and spiritually. And I never guessed the world would care. I got so busy, I quit my day job. Hospitals started wanting more and more. So I turned my keynote, as I mentioned, into this year-long program. And that's how I got started. As unbelievable as it is, I know.
That is some story. It really is. What an experience, and what a journey that led from that experience. So what advice would you give to nurses who are experiencing burnout, emotional, physical exhaustion, have lived through the pandemic, and now are looking at ways to reduce burnout, to take care of themselves? What are some of your best advice and tips in that regard?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say to them, please don't quit. We need you desperately. And I understand why. Paul, I am in awe. When you tell me everything that you did and all that you witnessed day after day, I am in awe. And Carla, with your job with the state, I can't even imagine the pressures and all of that. I've never experienced anything like that. I mean, I was in Vietnam for 5 days with all those babies, and you did this for months and months and months. So God bless you, and thank you both, first of all. And so the thing I like to say, and this is not exactly the answer to your question, but I hope nurses don't quit. Do as Paul did. Take a break. And you're so wise to have done that, Paul, because I've met lots of travelers and they just go from the next to the next to the next because it's good money and I got to make all I can and I got to pay off those loans and they don't take the self-care breaks. And the way that Carla said that she found a friend to walk the journey with her, and she tapped into her faith, And so I would suggest that everybody step back, take a look at your life, do that self-assessment, and honestly make a list. Paul knows what he needs. He's like me. I need nature. I need outdoors. I need space. Some people don't. They want crowds. They whatever. But do that assessment and then literally make a list of what you need. But please consider body, mind, and spirit, not just one or the other. I always joke, it's one thing to get a stress ball and lower your HDL. That's great. But we need to take care of body, mind, and spirit as well. So I would suggest they look at that review of the symptoms, make their list, and then make a commitment and take a break if you need from healthcare. But the good thing about our profession, and I'll make this plug always, is that the good news is we don't have to all work in the ER like Paul did. You can work in any setting, in pediatrics, geriatrics, home care, intensive care, schools. There's jobs and if you're tired of the direct patient care, there's quality and all the other areas that we can serve in, and we desperately are needed. Nurses, U.S. Labor Department says we will be 1.1 million nurses short by 2030.
Yeah.
So please take care of yourself so you can hang in there and continue to serve.
Well, I think a lot of good advice and a really just an incredible, awesome account of nurses and what everybody has lived through and how important it is to take care of yourself, because it is such an important job. And I think nurses really just have such a unique quality about them. And there's something special about nurses who just have so much compassion and empathy. And that's why you got into this profession. And as Leanne said, there are ways to take care of yourself and help navigate through this difficult time. I'd like to talk a little bit more about culture shock and how you need to take care of yourself and how there can be burnout when you come to the United States. Because a lot of the viewers that are watching right now are either just newly arrived in the United States, or they might be arriving in the United States soon. And as an immigrant myself, I know that both Carla and Paula also came to the United States as immigrants. We know that coming to the United States can be difficult at the best of times. There's a lot of challenge. There's culture shock, which is a very common phenomenon. And if you couple all of that with the pandemic, what nurses have gone through in the last 2 years, the shortage of nurses in America, patients getting older, getting sicker, the silver tsunami, there's a lot of compounding factors here. But for nurses coming from overseas who have worked really hard to come to the United States, I think it's also important just to talk a little bit about what they can expect and what advice and tools and methodologies we can suggest to help them through that transition as they enter the country, who is still, we hopefully moving out of the pandemic, but still, in this phase. So I'd like to put up a slide about the kinds of feelings that you can experience with culture shock when you first arrive in the country. Carla, can you maybe talk a little bit about your experience, and did you experience some of these emotions when you first arrived here? Helplessness, stress, surprise, fear, indignation, loss, homesickness, confusion, and rejection.
So as I'm looking at the slide, I would have to say that with my experience, it was homesickness, loss and homesickness, because I did not actually originally plan to work in North Dakota. I asked to be assigned in a different state, which is much closer to where my immediate family is. But for some reason, I landed here. So that was also one disappointing fact that happened to me. And then aside from that was helplessness, because I did not know anybody here. Like none of my friends knew anybody in North Dakota. So that's another factor that helped me feel that helpless. And then I guess the stress, because when I came here, I did not immediately start with orientating in the facility. I had to wait like 9 days. It had to do with my license endorsement. So yeah, I was just by myself in the apartment without any friends. So the only people that were helping me were from the staffing agency who came here before me. So they were helping me out, pick up some stuff, move some of the furnitures that I bought, and then when they go home, I'm all by myself. So one thing that I made sure that I had was the internet connection. So I was always,
Tip.
yeah, that was the most important thing for me because food, I can just probably go to McDonald's. Even if it's fast food, it's still food. So I was always online with my parents and my other members of my family. So to make sure that I don't get crazy because I'm just by myself in a two-bedroom apartment, and it was a bit huge for me. So, and then one thing that, of course, shocked me here is everything has a price. Everything has a price tag. And
Mhm.
coming from me, because I work in the Middle East, so I was only paying for maybe when I go out, for the taxi, the cab fare, and my cellular line. That was the only thing that I was paying for. But here, everything has a price tag. So that one was one thing that I missed. I said, was this really the right choice that I
Mhm.
actually migrated here? I know this has been my childhood dream from what I can remember. We had like autographs, and I would always say there, want to be a nurse. What is your ambition? To be a nurse, to be a nurse, to be a nurse. And then that was like my culminating point. Did I make the right choice to
Yeah.
be here? Because I'm all by myself. No one, it's not like it's my first time abroad, but just thinking of those people who had no previous experience working outside of the country, it will be much more for them because they would really feel that burden, that feeling of loss and loneliness, especially if they don't know anybody around. So that will be a huge deciding factor of how they're going to cope, and hopefully they will be able to, just like I did.
They will get through it, definitely, like we all did. But at the same time, as I said, coming to the United States at the best of times can be stressful, and you experience culture shock and a lot of
Mhm.
those feelings. And that's where, it's still being at the tail end, hopefully, of the pandemic, but all the repercussions that have come from that, self-care is vitally important for new arrivals. Paul, if we look at some of those feelings and some of those emotions, did you experience some of those things as well when you came here?
Definitely. For me, there was a lot of stress and, of course, loss and homesickness and confusion. Like what Carla shared earlier, I was one of those nurses who've never worked outside the home country, Philippines, prior to coming over here. So for all 30 years of my life, I was in the Philippines working with Filipinos. And then, of course, you move to the United States. It's a melting pot of culture, and now you're immersed with what, five, six, seven, eight, more than 10 different cultures at the same time. It was really like it was hard to adapt at the beginning. I would not lie. In my first 3 months, I wanted to like go home. Like I was like, I think I'm done here. I gave it a try. I like it, but I think I'm more comfortable being at home. And there was a lot of homesickness that I had to call my mom every day, and there was a lot of anxiety. Like, what if I get sick? I do not know anyone. The problem with me is I don't have family members in the United States. I'm a first generation immigrant. My friends are all spread out. I was assigned in South Texas, and I have friends from San Francisco, from New York. It's not like I can go to them all the time because I still have to work to earn my money. But so definitely there was a lot of communication barriers as well. I mean, um, it was hard to like express yourself. Sometimes I try to say something, but instead of me saying it in English, I'd say it in Filipino, and my patients are like, "Hey, hold on, what did you just say?" Like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I was talking to you in English." But it was hard. So it was a struggle at the beginning. Lots of stuff that you have to go through, like I was established in the Philippines, and then here I felt like, oh, I have to start at the very beginning. I had to leave all my stuff in the Philippines. Now I have to buy these again, buy more clothes, buy more furnitures, this and that. Get to know your community, because you're not only getting yourself assimilated with work, but also your community. Where's the nearest bank? Where's the police? What I mean, the first time that I was ever in a car accident, I had to call. So I lived with a Filipino family for a bit, and I had to call them like, okay, I just got into an accident. What do I do? Do I call 911? Do I step out of the car and ask them for the insurance?
Yeah,
Because I mean,
these
I'm
are
scared. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, how do they do it here? Like, I know what to do if I was back at home, but I don't know. So many stuff
feel
that happen
lost.
here. You feel lost,
You feel
exactly.
lost. Yeah,
So I was like,
absolutely.
should I just go back to the home country where I feel comfortable, or stay here and learn? So I chose to stay here and learn because I felt like I had more opportunity for growth, and I wanted to learn more about different races. I love to travel. I love to travel because I love to learn new things about the places that I visit, about the people that I visit, about the food that they eat, and the culture. So in order for me to learn more about people, I have to assimilate and like put myself in the middle and really understand different races, different um, beliefs and different attitudes. And I learned from my patients as well. I tell them, oh, that's something that I've never experienced before, but thanks for letting me know. Eventually, it got better.
It
Like what
does get
Carla said,
better.
it's only
Yeah.
hard at the beginning,
Yes.
and but it gets better.
Yes,
Yep.
and that's where you can see, this is well documented that culture shock is, it looks kind of like a dip. You start off with a honeymoon period, you arrive in the United States, worked so hard to get here, came here for greener pastures, and you have that honeymoon period, and then all of those feelings come into place with a lot of change and a lot of stress, and you have what we call the dip, but it does over time get better and you do start to adapt. So that's the hope. And I really want to thank Carla and Paul for sharing your story, because I think that this will be so inspirational for so many nurses who are arriving in the United States now or have just arrived in the United States and experiencing culture shock, where they're coming from a post-pandemic world where they have been depleted and drained, as Leanne said. And then they're coming into this environment, which is a whole nother compounding layer of burnout and stress that can occur. Leanne, in your experience, what would you say to a nurse who is newly arrived in the United States, might have been burnt out from the experience over the last 2 years in the pandemic and now going through culture shock? What are some of the strategies that you would suggest?
Talk to Paul.
Good one.
Yeah, it sounded like he really did. I'm born and raised United States. I'm an Iowa farm girl. So all that you're telling me about is foreign, forgive the pun, to
Yeah.
me. But I guess I would say that exactly the things that they talked about. And I know I sound like a broken record, but when you come here, also to remember to take really good care of yourself and know that we are social beings, and to reach out to that community and to form new communities. And like Carla said, to find a friend that walked the journey with her. And so that you can reach out and have people that can support you. And it must be really hard to ask, even for that, to step out with that confidence, to tap into the resources. And maybe another thing is to ask about all the resources we do have here in the United States. There are so many wonderful things that are for free, that don't include welfare necessarily, but just so many resources we have with libraries and lending services and churches and communities and events and trails in cities, and to ask the locals and see how you can be connected to find the resources that you need to care for yourselves.
So great advice. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of that is about connection and knowing that it will get better and having the courage to persevere, because it is, the pandemic is going to pass. The culture shock is going to pass. These things do pass. And it's really being grateful also in the moment for the blessings of that, that the pandemic is hopefully coming to an end, and that, for those nurses who arrive in the country, that you are now here and living your American dream. And I think that's a great place for us to actually finish off. I really wanted to thank the panel today for joining us, and for everybody who is watching from all over the world. I think this is such an important topic. Nurse burnout, as we said in the beginning, is a buzzword. We hear it in the news every single day, but there is enormous pain and suffering that comes from nurse burnout. And as Leanne said, I think that was a great way of putting it, is that, it is draining. But the good news with that is that there are tools and strategies that can help you to fill yourself up. It's kind of like that being on the airplane, give yourself oxygen. Because when you give yourself oxygen, then you're able to give those around you oxygen. So just to sum up, establish strong interpersonal skills. I know that everybody on the panel has spoken about that, setting boundaries between work and personal life, invest in proper sleep, pay attention to self-care practices, lots of tips and pointers that everybody on the panel has shared. And turn to therapy or other employee assistance programs as well. A lot of employees have that as a resource. As Leanne said, there's a lot of resources that might be available for nurses that are going to be coming and living and working in the United States. So to finish off, I thought if everybody just wants to give one final piece of advice for nurses who are going through burnout and want to take care of themselves. Let's start with Carla.
So for me, I think just to add more, like what Leanne said there, if you go to the CDC website, if you really feel like you're experiencing this burnout, reach out. I know there's this stigma that's keeping us or preventing us from doing that. And like what you just mentioned, the employee assistance program, I think most of the employers have that, because I know with the facility that I used to work for, they have that. So use that, exhaust your resources first, reach out to someone in the know, reach out to your supervisor or your nurse manager, someone who can really help you out. And like I said, if you go to the CDC website, they have a disaster distress hotline. For if you're really feeling so emotionally overwhelmed, you can actually text. I'm not sure if that's a text message or call, but if you go to the CDC website and type in COVID, you will find that there's a disaster distress hotline. You can make use of that, or if you know anyone else who might make use of that, so you can provide them that number. And like I said, always do a self check, just even for 5 minutes. Just take a break, stop, appreciate like what is around you. Always feel grateful of what you have, and acknowledge yourself for, and put like pat in the back. Say that to yourself that you did a good job for today. So just be in that moment, be in the present moment, and acknowledge everyone that who has helped you made the journey, and try to always have that positive mindset. It will I believe that it will really make you go ways beyond what you can imagine, as long as you maintain a positive mindset.
Yeah, I think you're so right, Carla. And when you speak about gratitude, when I love Oprah, and Oprah always talks about a gratitude journal. In fact, for those nurses who come through Connetics, we give them a gratitude journal when they arrive. And I think that that's really so important, is to, it's how you perceive things, and you're having a positive attitude really changes your mindset from that. And what do they say? You can have either a mindset of fear or love. And it shifts you from fear to love if you're grateful. Paul, what would you say is your final words of advice to anyone who's experiencing burnout and how to care for themselves?
Yeah, I think we've all said lots of really great things that are really important for self care. But I want to remind our nurses that we're human beings, we have needs. Earlier, we talked about going into therapy, and I'm working with my therapist right now. I didn't think I needed therapy until I was in the middle of the pandemic and all these crazy things were happening, and it's affecting me and causing me a lot of burnout too. But I would want to share what my therapist said, which I shared yesterday as well, that I keep in mind, because sometimes we like to give and give and give, but like what Leanne has shared earlier, you cannot run dry. You have to replenish yourself too. Being selfish is not bad. We have a negative connotation to being selfish. You have to remember you have a need. You have to focus sometimes on yourself and actually take a step back and see where you're at and see what actually brings you your purpose back in your life, your happiness back in your life. Sometimes the world can be so busy with our jobs, with our family, with our responsibilities, but we cannot live our lives with those things just controlling our lives. We have to make sure that we're living our lives with a purpose. So take that day off, spend about 2 to 4 hours doing things that make you happy. It could be something like physical activity, yoga, meditation, a prayer, connecting with your friends, singing, dancing, sitting in the park and, smelling the air, going to the beach and just listening to the water, listening to songs. But find those things that will bring your purpose back in your life. And then tomorrow, the following day, you'll feel, like you're refreshed and like you've rejuvenated your spirit back. But Leon has made a good point about we're not only trying to like care for our body and minds, but we're also a spiritual being, and that means connecting with other people, connecting with our souls, with the one being that gives us life. So find your purpose and make sure that you're pursuing pursuing your happiness and caring for yourself, both in physical, in social, emotional, mental, and spiritual. So I guess those are really important.
I love it, Paul. Because if you don't feed your mind and strengthen your body, you really can't find that meaning and that purpose, because you're just too depleted, you're too exhausted.
Right.
And I also love the fact that you are very courageous in talking about getting help, because I think sometimes there's a stigma that, getting help is a weakness. In fact, it's a strength, I think, because that's where if you're getting help, you're actually taking control of your own life. And I think just the fact that you are speaking about that will give a lot of hope and inspiration to people who might be feeling lost and not sure where to go. And final words, Leanne?
Well, gosh, those are hard acts to follow. The two of them just summed up my entire self-care for healthcare program. We
Okay,
talked about
good.
gratitude and all of those things. I guess I would leave. I can sum it up in almost in a sentence. I would encourage everyone to care for themselves as lovingly and as attentively as you do a patient or someone you love the most in the world.
Oh, I love that, Leanne.
We would never
Wow.
deny anybody else food, drink, and we deny ourselves. So care for yourselves as lovingly as you do a patient or someone you love. And remember, Nurses Week is always May 6 to 13 here in the United States. But American Nurses Association has made the entire month of May Nurses Month.
Nurses Month.
So go celebrate yourself and be grateful for all that you have, as they said, but really celebrate and love being a nurse and find your joy and your passion in it again. And thank you for giving so selflessly.
Well, thank you. Thank you to everybody on the panel, and thank you to everybody who's watching. You can see on the screen some of Leanne's books that you can purchase as well, and there's a QR code on the bottom of that. And I think the message really being that there is hope. There is a lot of positivity and a lot of ways for nurses to care for themselves. But I think loving yourself as you would somebody, as Leanne said, loving as you would love your patients, as well as somebody that you love, I think really just says it all and is a great place to end off. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. This has been such an interesting topic that I hope that it has been inspirational. And I want to thank the LaFora admin team again for giving us this opportunity. LaFora is all about nurses helping nurses. And I hope that that's what the last hour has been. And before everybody leaves, just one thing, we have some upcoming shows just to remind everybody. So we have on Friday, on our Onwards and Upwards show on the Connetics USA channel, we have our immigration Q&A, we have our legal immigration panel. On the 13th, we have Life as a Nurse in Nevada, what it's like to live and work in Nevada. On the 20th, we have our IELTS bonus class. On the 27th, the NCLEX bonus class. In June, the QA immigration panel again on the 3rd. On the next LaFora talk show is going to be very interesting topic. What are the clinical differences that we might expect overseas and working in the United States? And then on our Onwards and Upwards show on the 10th, we have our clients showcase one of the most prestigious hospitals in the United States, Cedars-Sinai, that are recruiting international nurses. So that, with that said, thank you to the panel, thank you to the LaFora admin team, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.